So one way of calculating interest is called simple interest, and that's where we're going to start. So simple interest is a way of calculating how much money you will pay or how much you will earn from interest in a certain amount of time. And there's a little bit of vocabulary that goes along with this. You're going to be looking at a formula that looks like this. And let's talk about what each of these letters mean. Principals is the P, and it stands for the amount of money that you put into an account at the beginning, or the amount of money that you borrow at the beginning. The rate is the interest rate as a percent. So you need, if the interest rate is, for example, 3.5%, you have to change that to a decimal and move by making it divide by 100, which is 0.035. So that would be your R. So interest rate as a decimal. And time is time, and it usually in years. And I think it's a good idea to always keep it in years. And finally, I, which is what we're calculating, is the interest. In other words, the amount of money that you're going to make or have to pay. So time, because we're always going to talk about time in years, we have to, and the problems aren't always given as years. So for example, if you're told that you only going to borrow some money for 6 months, you have to change that to years. And the way you do that is you write it as a fraction. So that's 6 months out of 12 months. So 6 out of 12, which is 0.5 if you do the division, years. Could be measured in weeks. So how many weeks is there in a year? So there's 14 weeks that you're going to be paying for the interest out of a total of 52 weeks in a year. So this is the number of weeks in a year. And if we're going to measure things in days, we've got to compare it to how long a year is in days. So 260 as a fraction would be 260 days out of a total of 365 days a year, because that's how many days there are in a year. So when we're given time that is not in years, we have to convert it to years by changing it into fractions. Let's do this with an example to practice. We had our formula from the last slide, PRT, and maybe I wasn't clear enough, but that means principal times the rate times the time. So let's read our problem carefully and identify what P and R and T is. P is the amount of money that I put into the account, called the principal, and it is $4,000 in this case. Here we go. The interest rate is 0.5%. But what's really important is I have to change this percentage, get rid of that percentage sign by changing it into a decimal. So it means 0.5 divided by 100, which is 0.005. And this is the number that I have to use in my calculation. This is the most important, this is most likely place students make mistakes. So maybe put a little star next to that in your notes to watch for that. And T is in time, and it's always important to make sure the time is measured in years. And here is my time, it's 2 years. So that means I'm ready to go. I can go P times, the interest is P times R times T. So the interest is going to be 4,000 times the interest rate, which is 0.005, times the time. If I pick up a calculator to multiply that, that works out to be $40. So this is the interest the bank will pay you. So you have your $4,000 plus the extra $40 interest. Now, simple interest is a good estimation, and I have to emphasize it's an estimation because banks and mortgages and such are calculated with a far more complex formula. So, and they're good estimation as long as the time period is short. And it doesn't take into effect the compounding effect. And compounding effect means, and we're going to talk a little bit about this in a later lesson, but just as an introduction, in this example, you started with $4,000. After 1 year, you ended up, after 2 years, you ended up with $4,040 in the bank account. Now, if you leave that money in the bank account and then calculate interest again, it's not going to be $40, it's going to be even more. That is called the compounding effect, and we'll be calculating a little bit or investigating that a little bit in a further lesson. But simple interest doesn't take that into account. So let's take another look at this. Susan has not paid her cell phone bill for 3 months, and how much will she be charged? So I am going to start with my simple interest formula. And P is the amount that she's either owed at the beginning or she puts into an account at the beginning. So in this case, she owes $150 at the very beginning, and then they're going to charge interest on that. So P in this case is $150.50. The interest rate is, and remember we said in the last example that it's a really good idea to stick to years. So here is the interest rate for a year. So it's 42.58% a year, and we have to change that by dividing by 100. So we get 0.425, it's a bit messy there, 0.4258. That's the interest rate. Now the time is in 3 months, so we want to change that to years. So 3 months out of 12. So 3 out of 12 is how many years it is. So if we calculate the interest, it's $150.50 times the interest rate, which is 0.4258, times the time in years. So that's 3 out of 12 months. So if you're going to do this on a calculator, you can do it all in one step, or you can multiply these two together first, then multiply by 3, and then divide by 12. So writing that out in longer form, 150.50 times 0.4258 times 3 divided by 12. And you get an interest of $16.0207. Now, since we're talking about money, it makes sense to round to the nearest cent. So that's $16.02. That's how much interest the telephone company will charge you if you are overdue by 3 months, or will recharge Susan in this case. So Tejinder is about to buy some furniture, and she's going to borrow $2,200 to buy that furniture. And the furniture company is going to offer her 2 deals. One, she can borrow the money at 4% per annum. Per annum means per year, for 18 months. Or she could borrow the same money with a little bit lower interest rate and a little bit shorter time. And so the question is, what is the better deal? So let's calculate the interest that she would be charged in both cases. And remember, interest equals P times R times T. So in this case, the principal is $2,200 and the interest rate is 4%, which is 4 divided by 100 or 0.04. And the time in years, it's 18 months, which is 1.5 years, which you can calculate as 18 divided by 12, which is 1.5 years. So putting that all together, the interest that she would pay is $2,200 times 0.04 times 1.5. So the simple interest calculation means that she'd be paying $132 of interest. So the $2,200 to buy the furniture plus $132 extra just because she has to borrow the money. Now what about if she used this other deal? So here the principal is also $2,200. The interest rate is a little bit lower. It's 3.5%. And I'm going to change that to a decimal. And the time is 2 years. Now here I don't have to do any change in time because it's measured in years. So I equals principal times interest rate times the number of years. And that works out to be $154. So it is cheaper for her, which is the better deal, to pay less interest. So it's actually cheaper for her to go for a higher interest rate because she's going to spend a little bit less time borrowing it, 18 months. So the better deal is deal 1. She's going to save a bit of money by doing it that way.